It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. At least 30 people are reported dead after a suspected Israeli airstrike on Rafah in Gaza.
First thing, no, I'm not sending everyone off to join the army.
Rishi Sunak insists his plan for mandatory national service will help young people. Labour say it's a gimmick.
Again, the Conservatives are making pledges without any idea where the money is going to come from. That is deeply irresponsible.
Nailing his colours to the mast, Sir Ed Davey unveils the Lib Dems election battle bus. Officials say more than 670 people are now known to have lost their lives in a landslide in Papua New Guinea. Southampton are promoted to the Premier League after beating Leeds in the playoff final at Wembley. Painting the town blue, thousands of Man City fans turn out to celebrate their club's historic Premier League title win. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30. Good evening. We begin with breaking news tonight and reports from the Hamas-run government media office in Gaza tonight that suggests that at least 30 people have been killed in suspected Israeli airstrikes on Rafah. The Palestinian Red Crescent says the strikes on the southern Gazan city hit tents for displaced people. We contacted the Israel Defense Forces but have not received any response yet. On Friday, the International Court of Justice ordered Israel to halt its offensive against Rafah. Well, earlier, Hamas launched rocket attacks from Gaza towards Tel Aviv for the first time in months. Air raid sirens sounded across Israel, including in Tel Aviv, but there have been no reports of casualties. Next tonight, the fourth day of the election campaign has seen the first policy announcement from the Conservatives, a promise to introduce a form of mandatory national service for 18-year-olds. The Tories insist the scheme would be a way to foster national pride, and they've confirmed that no one would be jailed for refusing to take part. But Labour has branded the plan a headline-grabbing gimmick, which won't help young people. And Reform's honorary president, Nigel Farage, has told Sky News the plan is unworkable as he criticised the UK's Muslim community. Our political correspondent Rob Powell reports on the battle for the right-wing vote.
From Brexit to Boris Johnson's 2019 campaign, the targeting of older voters and those with more right-wing views can pay electoral dividends. Adopting the language of the army, Rishi Sunak is now trying something similar, proposing a new mandatory form of national service for all 18-year-olds.
No, I'm not sending everyone off to join the army.
A likely tough sell to younger voters, the Prime Minister trying to speak their language online. Also defending the scheme, a former soldier turned Home Secretary asked what happens to teenagers who refuse to take part.
There's going to be no criminal sanction for this. No one's going to jail. The broader point about this national service is that we want to build a society where people mix with people outside their own communities, mix with people from different backgrounds, different religions.
On the march in a target seat, the Shadow Chancellor deployed to reassure Tory voters on the economy. But on this Conservative plan, a brutal assault.
They're not clear about how it's going to be funded. I think this morning the suggestion was that money was taken from this government's levelling up scheme, so taken out of local communities to fund this new expensive gimmick. I don't think that's the right approach.
Politics, patriotism and service, topics closely linked. But in this campaign, a raging battle on the right will loom large.
While broader brush polling suggests national service is popular with traditional Tory voters, the detail presents a more mixed picture. That said, the electoral aim here is clear: shore up the Tory base and stop voters going to other, more right-wing parties.
Parties like this man's. Reform UK threatened to split the Conservative vote, its president showing he's prepared to rile and offend to land their message.
We have a growing number of young people in this country who do not subscribe to British values, in fact, loathe much of what we stand for. So what do you do?
Who are we talking about there?
Oh, I think we see them on the streets of London every Saturday.
What do they look like? Oh, we're talking about...
What do they look like?
Are we talking about Muslims here?
We are.
One Muslim group saying a battle on the political right risks causing harm to communities on the ground.
I think it's this emboldened racism that we're seeing as a result of this very, very divisive politics in which Muslims are again scapegoated. Right. So it's troubling and worrying, but also it has a real life impact and consequences for all of us.
Given the prize at stake, neither party will retreat in this race for power. The next time MPs return here, politics will look very different. Rob Powell, Sky News in Westminster.
So what exactly does the Conservatives' vision of national service look like? Well, there'd be two branches that 18-year-olds could choose from. The first is a full-time military placement for a year. It would be one of 30,000 placements on offer with the armed forces and would come with a paid salary. The second option is volunteering 1 weekend a month, carrying out a community service. That would be unpaid and would involve spending 25 days with organisations like the fire service, the NHS and the police. The government has stressed that people who refuse to do either option won't be sent to prison. The plan is expected to cost £2.5 billion, and the Conservatives say they intend to roll out the scheme in 2025 if they're successful in the election. Sky's Adele Robinson has been canvassing reaction to the plan.
Unpaid volunteering every month for a year for 18-year-olds. If the Conservatives win, weekends will look a lot different.
Having it enforced feels like a punishment.
The volunteering should be a choice.
Legally enforceable and therefore divisive.
I did Duke of Edinburgh, so I really enjoyed volunteering and I did it for many years. However, compulsory volunteering is kind of contradictory, and having to do it compulsory takes away from the point of doing it in the first place a little bit.
Part of the policy too, recruiting into the armed forces.
I'm not going to lie and say that no 18-year-old wouldn't like the appeal, because I did air cadets as a child, and like a lot of them really wanted to enter the armed forces and the Royal Air Force and things like that. So there are young people that want to do it, but they go ahead and do it. They don't need policies like this to sort of force them or encourage them to do so.
Most sensational item of news in the life of the present government is undoubtedly the announcement of the ending of the caller.
Post-Second World War, more than 2 million were called up. Sunak's plan is for national service again, but not as we know it, with 30,000 18-year-olds on military placement.
But it would be voluntary. In reality, however, if you're in the armed services, you could be sent to war. And while national service is popular in other parts of the world, those countries aren't really engaged in active operations the way the UK sometimes is.
It's aimed at voters with national service nostalgia, key to winning this Northampton South seat.
If we could get some of the young people of the country helping out with causes and things like that, that'd be fantastic.
It would impact my opinions on who I'd vote for and everything like that, but I need to read up on it more to find out what option's the best one to go for.
If I was given the opportunity back then, yeah, I'd have gone for it. So I think it's a good idea. I think it gives youngsters a chance to do something as opposed to not.
A headline-grabbing policy costing £2.5 billion. Easy promises, critics say, when the Conservatives may not need to deliver. Adele Robinson, Sky News.
Political correspondent Rob Powell is in Westminster for us tonight. And Rob, have you been able to gauge how this national service idea has gone down in political circles?
Look, I think it is tightly targeted at a certain group of voters. So whilst there has been some dissent and questioning over its practicality, I think the Conservatives will be happy that it's changed the conversation of the campaign, if you like. I think in reality, despite it being dressed up in a kind of military context, 95% of the people that take part in this, or would take part in it if it comes into action, would actually be taking part in a sort of mandatory volunteering scheme, even if that isn't a contradiction in terms. That said, I think this is about politics, this is about voters, and this is about the sort of battleground on the kind of social policy battlefield with parties like Reform. Now, there's a similar battle going on the bigger economic battleground between the Tories and Labour. Now, one of the key aims for the Conservative campaign in this election is to try and convince voters that to try and fulfil some of their big change promises, Labour would need to spend more money, and that would come from increasing taxation. Now, to try and stunt that, to neuter that accusation, if you like, Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, has today said that a Labour government would not put up income tax and would not put up national insurance, those two big taxes on incomes. Now, this is sharper language than we've heard from her before. The idea, the suggestion has been around quite a bit before, but I think this is an attempt to try and cut that off right at the beginning of this campaign. And I think that pledge, in terms of who it appeals to, can be put alongside the Labour Party's focus on pensioners today as well. The Shadow Work and Pension Secretary talking a lot about Labour's commitment to the triple lock ratcheting up method for the state pension, and also accusing the Tory party of putting pensioners' incomes at risk through recent chaotic events to do with the economy. The difficulty with all this is the state pension costs a lot, and it comes alongside other sectors, other bits of the state that will be hungry for cash. So the question that would face Labour, if they are to get into government, is where will all of that money come from? But I think the priority for now for Labour is reaching out to voters outside of their traditional base, because it's really that support that will be vital if they're to get into government.
Rob, thank you. And if you scan the QR code on your screen right now, you can listen to the latest episode of our Politics at Jack and Sam's podcast. This week, our Deputy Political Editor Sam Coates and Politico's UK editor Jack Blanchard discuss just why Rishi Sunak called the election when he did, and his chances of turning things around before July the 4th. You can follow Politics at Jack and Sam's wherever you get your podcasts from. Just want to bring you some breaking news. This is an update on the story we carried a short while ago that at least 30 people reported dead after what we were then saying was a suspected Israeli airstrike on Rafah in Gaza. We now have a statement from the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, and they say a short while ago an IDF aircraft struck a Hamas compound in Rafah in which significant Hamas terrorists were operating. The strike was carried out against legitimate targets under international law, using precise munitions and on the basis of precise intelligence that indicated Hamas's use of the area. The IDF is aware of reports indicating that as a result of the strike and fire that was ignited, several civilians in the area were harmed. The incident is under review, and that ends the statement from the IDF. So they are confirming that strike was carried out by their forces on Rafah. We'll keep you abreast of any further developments. Those are the latest pictures you're seeing. Our team in Gaza as emergency services fight to tackle the blaze as a result of that airstrike. We'll keep you across that story throughout the course of the evening. At least 670 people have been killed in a large landslide that devastated parts of northern Papua New Guinea. As many as 6 villages have been impacted by the landslide, with relief crews working to relocate those affected. Matthew Thompson reports.
Where once stood homes, shops, a community, now there is only earth. An entire village buried alive. Locals dig for their loved ones, hope slowly ebbing along with the mountain waters.
Over here, you can see that they are suspecting our relative is down here.
At around 3 a.m. on Friday, an enormous landslide hit the village of Kaukalam in the mountainous Enga province of Papua New Guinea. Around 150 homes were buried. Early estimates put the death toll at close to 700, but that is only a guess.
Well, it depends actually on the number of houses that are buried. If we are talking about 150, that could be more or less a realistic figure because A, this disaster happened at a time when everybody was asleep, 3 a.m. local time. And secondly, family sizes in Papua New Guinea are approximately 5 people.
Across the region, a total of 6 villages were hit by the landslide. It's left debris of up to 8 metres deep over an area of 200 square kilometres, hampering relief efforts.
I think one of the challenges is that the ground is still quite unstable, so it's difficult for big machinery to get in. Another challenge is that at least 200 metres of the main access road has been destroyed, so it's quite hard for vehicles to get in.
Swallowed by the mountain, most of the dead remain buried. Just a handful of bodies have been recovered. Funerals can begin for those few, but the grief here is hundredfold. Matthew Thompson, Sky News.
Let's take a look at the rest of the day's news for you now. And police investigating the fatal stabbing of a woman on a beach in Bournemouth have released CCTV images of a suspect. A 34-year-old woman was pronounced dead at the scene at Durley Chine Beach on Friday night. A 38-year-old woman was seriously injured and is in hospital. A 17-year-old from the Lancashire area who was arrested on suspicion of murder remains in custody. The RAF has named its pilot who died in a Spitfire crash near Lincoln yesterday as squadron leader Mark Long. The Spitfire of the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight was flying near RAF Coningsby when the crash happened. At least 15 people have been killed after powerful storms hit the American states of Texas, Oklahoma and Arkansas. US officials say 5 of those killed were in Texas, where a tornado on Saturday struck a rural area near a mobile home park. Ukrainian soldiers have told Sky News that shortages of weapons and ammunition mean they're counting every shot they fire at advancing Russian forces. That's despite recent commitments from Ukraine's NATO allies to increase the production of munitions. Our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes, reports.
Yes. Learning to fight, a heavy responsibility. He's shown how to hold an NLAW anti-tank missile, then corrected when he gets it wrong. Other recruits watch closely. Then they take it in turns to have a go. The trainer careful in his teaching. First given to Ukraine by the UK, the NLAW has been in high demand. But limited stocks means the only time these soldiers will fire one for real will be in battle, and even that's not guaranteed.
We have a lack of NLAWs, and we need more.
What's your message to the factory workers back in the UK that are making these things?
We would like to thank our Western partners for their help. But if possible, we would be very grateful if they could provide more NATO munitions.
Ukraine is suffering a shortage of weapons and ammunition all along its front line. Soldiers say for every 5 artillery shells fired by Russia, they can only shoot back 1. At a base in Kharkiv region, a commander says his team tries to make every strike count.
Often, with just 1, 2 or 3 shells, we can completely destroy a target.
But his troops still need more.
We have to keep holding the Russians back and make every centimetre they try to take cost them hundreds of lives.
What we'll do here is we'll manufacture canisters for NLAW missiles.
It's why production lines, rather than the front line, could be where the war in Ukraine is won. Last month, we visited a site in Northern Ireland where the NLAW missile is assembled by a company called Thales, though it's designed by the Swedish firm Saab.
We've doubled our capacity to deliver, and there's scope again to double even further.
And it feels quite calm and quiet, but is there intense pressure?
Well, it's fair to say everyone feels the pressure, but it's controlled, very much controlled. No one's under significant stress, that's for sure.
That's perhaps surprising given the urgency of the requirement in Ukraine. The capacity for NLAW production only began to increase here in January.
But obviously the war started 2 years before that, so why did it take until the start of this year?
We don't supply Ukraine UK MOD are supplying Ukraine, so they had stocks themselves which they were granting in kind. Then they go through their own procurement process, then they'll place those orders.
If the order had come a year ago, you could have ramped up production sooner.
The earlier an order comes, the sooner we can ramp up that production.
Production lines here and at other defence companies in the UK are expanding, but it will take leadership and much more money from government to ramp up capacity to the level that many believe is needed, given we're in what the Defence Secretary has called a pre-war world.
No such luxury in Ukraine, where conflict is a daily reality and soldiers make do with what they've got. Russian forces are benefiting from their economy having long been on a war footing. Unless the UK and Ukraine's other allies catch up, Russia's advantage will only grow. Deborah Haynes, Sky News.
More now on the general election campaign, and the state of housing is becoming a key battleground. It's a crisis at the centre of a community in South Yorkshire, where locals, fed up with broken promises, are making candidates take notice. Becky Johnson reports.
This is Maltby, a former mining town in South Yorkshire. It lies in Rother Valley, always Labour, until 2019 when it went Tory. As the campaign here gets underway, this is what people on this estate want to talk about. A row of empty, disused former homes, known here as the derelicts. They've been like this for around a decade. The estate is called Little London, but nicknamed Little Beirut for its resemblance to a war zone. The banner promises improvement work, but residents say they've heard it all before, yet never see any action. The homes around are all privately rented. This estate is one of many where tenants feel threatened into silence, unable to complain. Aaron and his boys live over the road. He works in construction, his wife is a paramedic. They're sick of having to worry about their children playing near a disused building site.
There are so many children on this estate, so many families, good hard-working people that have been forced to live with such a mess for so long.
Why do you think nothing gets done?
I think it's become the status quo, where people are so terrified of complaining. They're worried about things like Section 21 no-fault evictions.
Why do people stay? Why do they not just leave?
The rent's incredibly cheap around here. People have been forced to have to live in these properties because they cannot afford anything better.
The poor design and flat roofs mean water seeps in, leaving them mouldy and damp inside. Like many private tenants across the country, people here have felt powerless to take on the people who own their homes.
If you look, it's all gathering up there.
Now they're determined to make it an election issue.
I blame the landlord, but I also blame the council for letting him get away with it. I blame the government for having all the laws on the landlord's sides so that the little people like us don't have any rights.
They've organised protests and invited parliamentary candidates to see the estate.
Anyone else have any issues?
A campaign that began in the local cafe is now gathering momentum.
We will stand up for ourselves and we'll make this better.
It's David and Goliath, it's that old, age-old story. What's happened here is it's what you call Yorkshire grit.
Rotherham Council says it's working with residents to find a long-term solution. Rivergrove Limited, that owns the derelicts, says it's applied for planning permission to demolish and rebuild them. But people here say they're not just fighting for their estate, but for the rights of tenants across the country. Becky Johnson, Sky News, Maltby.
Manchester City may have fallen short against rivals United in yesterday's FA Cup final, but fans have turned out in their thousands this evening to celebrate their club's historic Premier League title triumph. City became the first in the history of English men's football to win 4 league titles in a row. Our sports correspondent Rob Harris joined the fans watching the team's victory parade.
All aboard the double-decker, despite being denied a double. Still this to celebrate, and another Manchester City milestone. The Premier League trophy, theirs to keep for an unprecedented 4th year in a row.
It's been a special season, obviously doing something that no one's done before. Yeah, unbelievable feeling. Couldn't have done it without the fans and the staff and the players, so yeah, delighted.
This parade, the sign of Manchester City's Premier League supremacy. Never before has a team won 4 titles in a row like this.
And even though the FA Cup is coming here to Old Trafford, there will be no United parade after what's mostly been another season to forget. Their 8th place league finish, the lowest in 34 years, and even the Wembley celebrations were overshadowed by doubts over the future of manager Erik ten Hag.
He's been too inconsistent. He's blaming some of the players, injuries and that, but I think it's time to get someone else and switch it up a bit.
I think they should give him a fair chance. I mean, it's down to the players as much as it is to the manager.
And in the city centre, days of delirium like this seem a distant memory for United fans. It's 11 years since they won this.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Pep Guardiola!
While City have won 6 of the last Premier League titles with Pep Guardiola.
Everything goes well, and step by step we are here, and looks like a routine, and hopefully we don't feel it's a routine. It's so complicated to arrive here, and it's time to celebrate it.
Stability at City contrasting with unrest at United. These players assembled for more than £1 billion. United have spent as heavily, but not as well.
Fair play to them. This is our day, 4th time in a row, setting standards, setting legends, so...
We're feeling nice, we got lucky. We thought we've got to give them one at some point. We have 4, we had to be generous. Yeah, you can't be greedy these days.
But amid the celebrations, this is a club fighting 115 Premier League charges, alleged financial rule breaches linked to Abu Dhabi investment. But fans and players take on the doubters with dominance. Rob Harris, Sky News, Manchester.
Let's get the rest of the sports news now with Julia.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
You're going to run, jump on the board and try and stick it in your glue like this.
How have you found retirement in general?
Retirement's been a real tough road. I think it is for everybody. I've had lots and lots of conversations with high-level athletes, and I think this is a period of discovering who Niall is, just existing. I've got a great life, I've got incredible people around me, and every day is a discovery just on my own self-awareness. For the most part, just putting my mental health at the forefront of my priority. I seem to be doing a lot better, certainly in the last sort of 6 months.
Has something switched? Why do you think you're doing better in the last 6 months?
I was just brave enough and disciplined enough to go, I don't actually like the person that I am when my behaviour's acting up, or I'm in my own little pity party and upset about I still want to be doing sport. I just thought just took control of that and did the things I know that were good for my mental well-being. To be, and particularly a male athlete, we're deemed as alpha and strong and having the answers, and we're warriors. Feeling depressed, anxious, having problems with addiction, they were really, really scary times in my life, and I certainly didn't feel the latter of all those feelings. And I think it's quite powerful for a male athlete to come out and talk about this. And in talking, I felt in the deepest, darkest moments, all I needed was someone to speak my language.
You're going to go one at a time when I say go, and then you walk to the back of the queue. Do we understand?
I was certainly one of those people that didn't necessarily believe in what mental health was and depression. I was a positive, outgoing guy and a successful guy, and I thought you could self-talk your way into a positive life. When depression slapped me in the face, obviously that isn't the case, and it is a scary, lonely period.
You obviously had a really bad neck injury. What effect can that have on an athlete?
That takes its toll mentally for sure, and certainly my neck injury, it did lead to end my career. But I think it changed who I was as a physical athlete. I realised how much I underpinned my definition of myself on my physical capabilities. If things were great in the gym and I was winning gold medals, brilliant. If I was injured or things weren't going so great, then I would just crash down to the ground.
You've spoken quite openly about drinking and gambling as well.
Mm-hmm.
When you look back now on your relationship with them, Is it almost like looking at a different person?
I've learnt the hard way that mental health and addiction are very, very closely aligned. They're like they're best pals, and unfortunately we start to use these things like alcohol and gambling to escape our own feelings. I look back on that, and having come through everything, just now my power and is self-awareness.
To anyone out there who's struggling, who doesn't know what they're going through, is feeling a bit different, what would you say to them?
You're going to get through this. It's going to be all right. You can do it. You know what I mean? I've done it. Lots of other people have done it. And talking is the first place to start, I think. You know, one day at a time, and you got this.
Obviously, we're in the Olympic year.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of people who are in, I know yours happened in the Commonwealth, but there's going to be a lot of people who are going to become famous overnight.
Yeah.
Their lives are going to change, their following's going to go up, they're going to get paid more.
Yeah.
It happened to you, and I think it did change your life.
Sure.
What advice would you give any young athlete who that's about to happen to?
We're going to see performances that just blow everyone's minds, you know, but why in the mix of all that would you talk about what comes after? You don't want to, it's just too exciting, I think.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Just want to bring you a reminder of our breaking news, and that is that within the past few minutes, the Palestinian Health Ministry has said the number killed in a strike on Rafah has risen to 35. The Palestinian Red Crescent says tents for displaced people were hit. The Israel Defense Forces have confirmed its aircraft struck what it says was a Hamas compound in Rafah, where it says Hamas terrorists were operating. It says the airstrike was legitimate under international law. Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by columnist for The Independent, James Rampton, and economics editor for The Spectator, Kate Andrews. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing, the front page of The Telegraph, its headline, Young Royals face national service in Sunak plan. We'll be right back. Do stay with us.